Hello everyone, welcome to my watercolor painting channel, and today we're going to be talking about art supplies you need for watercolor. Before we begin, I would like to remind that I have a Patreon where I upload weekly watercolor tutorials. Join me and become my student. So let's talk about paper supplies. As an artist with some experience, I would like to point out that paper is probably the most important part. If you are thinking where to invest more money, definitely choose paper. You won't regret it. When people start trying watercolor, they quite often could be put off by their first results, and the reason might be a wrong type of paper. Good paper 100% makes your art 10 times better, or right paper for your technique. There are so much choice in watercolor paper, and I will share with you my favorites. Why you need a special watercolor paper? Well, simply because it must absorb quite a lot of water and it must be tolerant to your techniques so it won't become a mess. So my favorite paper, and it has been for many years now, is Arches Cold Press. I absolutely in love with this paper, and honestly I couldn't find anything better for my technique as well. Next one is Canson. I use this paper nowadays, and even though it is considered as an average sort of cheap paper, but it's very affordable and thick, and honestly performs so well. Ideal paper for practicing, making swatches, etc, etc. So next one is an example of hot pressed paper from Daily Rowley. And this is the paper that I really like, and like I mentioned before, this is hot pressed. So what is cold pressed, hot pressed? Well, cold pressed, it's more absorbent and it dries out quicker, where hot press takes time to dry, which helps with time when you can adjust your artwork. And for a beginner, I definitely recommend cold pressed. Hot pressed has a smooth surface finish and color look brighter, and it allows to demonstrate quite a lot of detail. So if you're a beginner, I would definitely recommend using cheaper types of paper for practicing, for example Canson, and I would definitely recommend it to be cold pressed, because it doesn't matter what technique you've got and what style of watercolor you're practicing, cold press paper is good for all of them. If you're using some big size watercolor paper and you have some offcuts left, don't throw them away. Me personally, I use offcuts for color trying. So when you're mixing watercolor paint on your palette and then you try it on the same type of paper you're painting, that way you will see 100% how it will look like on your artwork. So make it useful and don't throw them away. Next thing I use is masking tape. So working with watercolor paper, if it gets a lot of moisture, some parts of the paper are sort of raising up, creating bumpy, uneven surface. So masking tape is an ideal instrument to fix it. Just find a flat wooden piece or plastic piece and attach your paper with masking tape, just like I've done on this video. So it gets removed easily. So paints, so I mostly use two brands. First is Winsor Newton watercolor, they're absolutely lovely, and the second one is my favorite is Nevskaya Palitra. And you can find different variations of how many colors you want, and they sell them in different pans and different sizes, and so yeah, there are lots and lots of different choices. As a good start, I would recommend 24 colors, and then 12, and then 6, and maybe then 3. In my next videos, I will be covering color theory and color mixing as well, so stay tuned. When you just open your new set of watercolor paints, I would definitely recommend creating a palette and put all the colors in order that you want to have them, and mix and put the colors of these paints in a special on a special paper with names on it. It will definitely will help you working with it. I also occasionally buy watercolors from other different brands. I don't have many, and I am mostly for finding interesting colors. And here also I'm demonstrating the white gouache that I had many questions about on my Instagram, how I do these vivid colors on my butterflies and moss. So basically I'm just mixing a little bit of watercolor with white gouache, and this gouache from Winsor & Newton is amazing, and I'm been using it for years now. I love how thick this watercolor, this gouache is, so it's definitely a very good one to have. However, you don't really need white gouache because in traditional watercolor you don't use white paints at all. You create it yourself by leaving white spaces or painting it that way that the white's coming through, because watercolor is transparent, so there is no white in traditional watercolor. So brushes. So I've bought or been given quite a lot of different brushes from different brands, and here I'm demonstrating brushes from Golden Maple. It's a very good synthetic range of brushes, really good quality, and they are quite affordable. Paulina Bright, again, I love using this brush for mopping, and amazing quality of the brush, just amazing. So my favorites at the moment are Pro Arte brushes, and I love natural hair brushes, and it's working best for my style, and I love water holding capacity for natural hair brushes. Ideally, I think the best brushes would be sable, 100% sable brushes. For very tiny fine details, I use Series 7 Winsor & Newton professional brushes, watercolor brushes. Another favorite brand is Panart. The quality is superb, and it's hard to get these brushes everywhere, so they're not sold in many countries, or it's harder to get them, but this is my personal favorite, and I have all the kinds of their brushes. So what else? Also, you would need a pencil and eraser for your for creating artwork, and I wouldn't recommend choosing very soft pencil, because it tends to leave smudges and marks on your artwork. You can use pens instead of pencils, and they work in as well as pencils. Palettes. In my work, I use them all the time, and there are plastic ones that I use from watercolor sets, and but mostly I just use these two ceramic plates, white ceramic plates, that you can use any plate, but I would say that it has to be white. Why I like using ceramic plates, because they're quite flat and white surface underneath, so you can see through. The problem with some of the fancy palettes, ceramic palettes, they're quite deep, and they are great probably for mixing gouache paints, but for watercolor, I don't know, I don't really like using them, because you can't really see the color you're getting unless you are mixing the color and then trying it on a paper before you apply it to your artwork. Yeah, so that's my opinion about them. Or if you are painting a really big botanical piece that you would need to pre-mix precise combinations of colors, maybe, yeah, but otherwise I don't like using them. Again, you will figure it out with experience what is best for you. And so next I use tissue paper to get rid of extra water. So next thing I use for my paintings is masking fluid. So masking fluid is for covering some light parts of your painting and make them white, or paint later once you finish with other layers. And it simply blocks paint where you applied it, and it could be easily rubbed off again when it's 100% dry with your finger or with some hard surface. It comes up very easily. So next tip is using protection for from your hand when you paint. So what happens when you apply cream on your hands and then you deciding to paint? Well, that's right, it will leave greasy marks on your painting. Or when oil gets on paper, it won't be able to absorb paint properly. So that's the next tip for you. Never apply moisturizer on your hands before you paint. So I use this white glove and I just cut these 3 finger spaces out just like that. So whenever I work, I know paper will be safe and oil free. Tracing paper can be used as a protection for your painting as well. So next part, if you're planning to showcase your artwork, consider having some equipment that can help to make your artwork stand out. For example, I use some vintage finds, natural materials like feathers, pine cones, or any pieces of stationery, swatches with colors. It gives your artwork support, and it gives it's like a storytelling for the people who's gonna look at it. So I consider using these bits if you're planning to, for example, upload your artwork on Instagram or any other social media to promote it. And to my last part, it's reference books. As a beginner, I would recommend to have a small collection of reference books, and it depends on your subject, style of illustration, watercolor style. So I paint mostly nature-related pictures and sort of botanical art with a twist, and I have created a small collection of vintage book, and so most of them I got from eBay or charity shops. I don't know if you have charity shops in your country or not, but we do have a lot in UK, and honestly the treasures I found them are just endless. I love charity shops. So I have books with with different plants, illustration of trees, seeds, animals, insects, all kinds. So this is my favorite book. It has a great collection of moss and butterfly illustrations. Old Osborne books have great illustrations in them. Even like I think I bought a couple of books for my child, and they were very old Osborne books, but they have amazing illustrations that I use and look sometimes at them. Especially dear to me to have reference books with illustrations made with watercolor, as looking at them you will see what colors been used for particular illustration and how they painted a particular subject. So it's very important to have this knowledge on how other people done it, and I'm not saying that you have to copy, but you are looking and you are just taking it into considerations on what colors being used, how they made it, can I change it for my painting, what can I use, etc, etc. in this book, it's an encyclopedia of animals, and it's not a vintage book, but it has all the amazing illustration of every single animal and insect, everything in that book. Amazing. That's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed watching it and learned something new. Ask me any questions in the comment section below. Like, subscribe and share if you can. Also, consider becoming my Patreon, where I upload my tutorials every week and you will get proper support from me. That's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments down below this video and I will be happy to answer them.